hello, and welcome to the part 6.5 of my 2024 F1 season simulation, where we recap the first 6 races of the simulation. So let's begin. The World Drivers' Championship is as following. Max Verstappen is leading the way on 111 points with 2 victories, 4 podiums, 3 pole positions, and 3 fastest laps. We have George Russell in P2, way ahead of Lewis Hamilton, with 93 points, 1 victory, 4 podiums, 3 pole positions, and 0 pole positions and 0 fastest laps. We have Charles Leclerc in the 3rd place in the World Drivers' Championship right now, with 1 victory, 2 podiums, and 3 fastest laps. We have Fernando Alonso carrying Aston Martin once again, with 2 podiums, 1 pole position, and 73 points on his name. Oscar Piastri, surprisingly, quite ahead of Lando Norris with 18-point lead over his teammate, with a victory, 2 podiums, and 1 pole position. Lewis Hamilton only P6 so far, 53 points, 40 points behind his teammate as well, 1 podium to his name. We have Lando Norris at 49 points so far, with a podium to his name, but lacking behind his teammate so far. We have Tsunoda in P8 with 42 points. I want to point out, Tsunoda is having an incredible season in the simulation, absolutely carrying this Racing Bulls team, or whatever it's going to be called. I assume it's going to be Racing Bulls, as they haven't officially announced it, but I'm pretty sure it's like in every single rumor ever at this point. Translating this into percentage, I'm pretty sure that's 84 points. 84 points of the point score of that team is from Yuki Tsunoda, which is pretty wild. Perez in P9 with 33 points. I want to calculate that. 67 plus 11, a 74 points deficit to Max Verstappen, without any podium so far for Perez. Very underwhelming once again. Carlos Sainz in P10, 45 points behind his teammate. Quite a big margin as well, considering he has a victory, a podium, and a pole position. Then we have Alex Albon in P11 with that podium from Saudi Arabia at 18 points. And we have Esteban Ocon on 11 points in P12. And we have Lance Stroll on 8 points in P13, as well as Daniel Ricciardo in P14 on 8 points as well. And we have Pierre Gasly in P15 on 5 points. And we have Nico Hülkenberg on 2 points in P16, same as Sargent in P17. We have Guan Yu Zhou in P18 with no points. Following him are Max and Bottas without points either. So this is the World Drivers' Championship. Let's see how it evolves throughout the first 6 races. We have the graph, which shows how many points are, and especially how many points drivers have throughout the championship so far in the first 6 races. As you can see, Max got a first victory in Bahrain. It may have looked like a pretty boring start, but then we had Max Verstappen only scoring like 1 point, and then we had, I'm pretty sure that was Charles Leclerc leading the championship, equal in points with George Russell after Saudi Arabia, but since Leclerc had a victory in Saudi Arabia, George Russell was only P2, but still a new championship leader after round 2. We go to round 3, where I'm pretty sure it was Carlos Sainz winning, but Verstappen retook the championship lead, but by such a small margin. You can see after Australia, it was extremely close already between Max, Russell, Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, and even Oscar Piastri was already up there. Carlos Sainz is pretty close to this championship as well at this point. But as we look into Japan, this was the moment where the championship was the closest. Max had another relatively bad Grand Prix. I think it finished like P5 or P4, whatever. In this moment, Piastri got the victory, I'm pretty sure, which meant he was leading the championship after Japan. So 3 different championship leaders in 4 races. That was very, very good and very exciting. Unfortunately, moving on to China, Verstappen had a pretty dominant showing in this first sprint race, which meant that he extended his championship lead quite a bit to a considerable margin of points over Fernando Alonso at this point. But as we move to Miami, George Russell actually scored the most points of any driver that weekend, which means he actually closes up to Max in the championship. Leclerc kind of falls down, as well as Alonso and Piastri. So right now it just looks like it's maybe Russell versus Verstappen, or unless we get some craziness and someone else joins the championship fight. But as you may think, and I think as well, this is probably the turning point where Max just flies away with the title. But you never know. We started the simulation pretty wild. We had three different championship leaders in the first four races, so maybe Max DNFs in the next three races and he drops to like P5 in the championship. It could happen. It could very well happen. Let's not rule out anything. Obviously, I have no power over the RNG, but I'll try my best to present it as exciting as it can be. Obviously, so I cannot control the RNG. When a driver DNFs, I cannot simply un-DNF them. So if Russell DNFs the next two races, Max gets a 100-point championship lead or whatever. I simply cannot do anything about it. I don't want to rig the simulation itself. I just want to let it simulate as it is. So this way, Max will probably win the championship unless Russell can maybe challenge him. Yeah, it looks like a pretty big championship lead for Max Verstappen already, 6 rounds in. Looking at the rest of the field, let's ignore the top 5 for now. We have Hamilton in P6 after Miami, but his journey was pretty rough as well. P5 in Bahrain, there was no points scored up until Japan, and then in China and Miami he got some decent points. Therefore, is now in P6, but that's very, very close. With Norris there, who is finally getting some pace from that car and is matching and beating Piastri, who started the season very, very strongly. So yeah, it was Tsunoda. There's Tsunoda, who very, very, very impressive so far. I am simply at loss of words how consistent and impressive Tsunoda is so far. Up there with the Mercedes and McLaren. I don't want to say number 2 drivers, as obviously Russell and Piastri are, after 2023, I would say the opposite of number 1 drivers. But as things stand, they're behind their teammates at the World Driver Championship. Tsunoda being that close to them just shows just how consistent he is, especially when you see Ricciardo down there with Stroll. But obviously Stroll is also very, very underwhelming so far with Alonso in P4 in the championship. I want to mention Albon. Yeah, that's the podium in Saudi Arabia, as you can see, big jump in the grab. And then no points ever since. I got a Sargent in points. I'm pretty sure it was China. Yep. As well as Gasly scoring some points there. Hulkenberg moved in Australia, so he's still right there. And the Sauber starting 0 points so far. Who have I not mentioned yet? Sainz and Perez both are getting demolished by their teammates, as World Driver Championship looks like right now. Obviously, head-to-heads may tell a bit different story, but we'll see about that. Perez obviously has no chance of a championship at this point. He's just not. There was no hope even if he would leave the championship at this point. Carlos Sainz, yeah, it looked very good after Australia. He was up there in the fight, just like 10 to 15 points behind the championship lead, with a very strong Ferrari at that point. But unfortunately, Ferrari kind of dropped off. Was very unlucky in some cases, and Sainz got some DNFs in as well, which caused the big gap between the Ferrari teammates in this case. So yeah, this is the World Drivers' Championship graph evolution, whatever I want to call it. Let's get into the World Constructors Championship, which is, in my opinion, championship fight is way more interesting here because we have Mercedes leading the way, 2 points ahead of Red Bull. Mercedes who the most podiums, but only 1 victory, 0 pole position and 0 fastest laps. I call this consistency. Honestly, they probably have the best driver lineup on the grid currently, so leading the championship in this way, it seems logical. Red Bull in P2, all carried by Max Verstappen, obviously, because I'm pretty sure. Okay, Max would be actually P3 in the constructors by himself at this point, but I mean, 5 points behind McLaren as a driver, not as a team. Max just doing another Verstappen things. Yeah, Red Bull and Ferrari having 2 wins each. McLaren 1 win from Piastri. Aston, Red Bull, and the rest of the back markers not quite winning. Yeah, Williams with that 1 podium from Saudi Arabia, still very, very impressive from Albon, even though he hasn't been performing as well in the recent few races. We've started not really outperforming him, but matching him at least. I want to mention, yeah, Aston Martin is pretty much the same. Alonso would be P5 in the constructors without Stroll. Stroll is just not bringing any points on the board. 2 podiums and 1 position for Alonso as well, which makes Aston look a bit better in the constructors. Racing Bulls with 50 points but 0 podiums or anything like that. Just consistent scoring, point scoring, especially from Tsunoda. Ricciardo not as much as Tsunoda scored like 84% of Racing Bulls points so far. Yeah, Williams 20, Alpine closing in with 16. I think this could be an interesting fight for P7 in the constructors between Williams and Alpine. P9 is pretty much just a fight between Haas and Sauber. I don't think any of those teams can challenge for P8 at this point, or Sauber is. Sauber will try to beat Haas to P9, but it will be very difficult with the current car. It's especially difficult when we have like 6 teams up there in the top 10 fighting for every single positions. There's just 10 positions in the top 10. It's an obvious thing to say, but we have 6 teams up there. I'm counting Racing Bulls as well, because Tsunoda is just very consistent in there, the top 10. Then the Williams and Alpines ahead of them as well. Significantly faster cars over the entire season so far. It's going to be very difficult for Haas and Sauber to score any more points, so this may not change throughout the season, but we'll always see. So what I want to point out are the fights between for the Constructors Championship, obviously, then fight for P3 and the fight for P7. Those are the closest fights, and keep an eye out for them. As we look at the evolution of the Constructors Championship, because yeah, we had obviously Red Bull winning in Bahrain with Perez bringing some points home, making it a Red Bull leading the championship after Bahrain. But then in Saudi Arabia, Red Bull scored like basically no points. It was just Max and P10, I'm pretty sure. So Mercedes jumped them in the championship and was leading the championship. But in Australia, it was a huge point swing, and Ferrari suddenly led the championship, the Constructor Championship, by not a significant margin, but a pretty solid margin. Then to Japan, it kind of shrunk by a little bit. Red Bull caught up a tiny bit, but McLaren actually caught up to Red Bull even more. At this point, it was very exciting, just teams changing all over the place in the Constructors Championship. But then China came, and Mercedes and Red Bull started to skyrocket ahead of the other 3 top teams, essentially, which left McLaren and Ferrari in the fight for P3 with Aston Martin and this should be Racing Bulls itself. There, forgot to change that. I wouldn't even think about changing this graph, honestly. This is something I completely forgot. Anyway, Sauber and Racing Bulls completely alone in the championship, as we have Williams and Alpine, obviously. in the fight for P7, with Alpine closing in every single Grand Prix at this point. Then we have Haas at 2 points and Sauber with 0 at the bottom of the graph. And this is how it looks like so far. Obviously, I don't want to jinx anything, but right now it looks like pretty much Red Bull versus Mercedes Constructors Championship, unless something crazy happens and both Mercedes and Red Bull DNFs and whatever Aston Martin gets a 1-2. You never know. It's a simulation and crazy things happen already, so it may happen again. Yeah, this is for the Constructors Championship. Let's look at the race, quality head-to-heads from the first 6 races. So, I know this sheet may look a bit scary at first sight, but it's actually pretty simple. Starting on the left, we have the sprint quali head-to-head. Then it's the quali head-to-head. Then the sprint quali plus quali combined. Then it's the average sprint quali position. Is the average quali position and the average sprint quali plus quali position, which is obviously made it so the quali is worth more, as there were 6 qualies and only 2 sprint qualies. So basically, average quali position is worth 3 times as much. Looking at the race head-to-heads, sprint race head-to-head on the left with the race next to it, then the combine of sprint race plus race head-to-head. Then we have the average sprint race finish. Then we have the average race finish, the combined one in the same way as the quali one. So let's look at the Red Bull first. They're tied in sprint quali, but Verstappen obviously is beating Perez quite convincingly in quali head-to-head. I'm pretty sure that one quali advantage for Perez is only from the time that Max was unfortunately couldn't compete in the next session. I think it was Australia. Sprint quali plus quali, yeah, 6-2, pretty much on Max side as we would expect. But average sprint quali position is 3.5. They're tied on there. Average quali position is, yeah, Verstappen is on 4.2, which is the second highest as of right now. Perez only 9.7. Considering Red Bull is technically P2 in the constructors right now, and Perez is having a 9.7 average quali position. That's not good. Average sprint quali plus quali, Max is again second overall here, just behind Russell. Perez 8.1, looking a bit better than 9.7, but still not anywhere near as good as it would need to be. Looking at this race head-to-heads, and here we see the demolition by Max. 2-0 for sprint races, 6-0 for races themselves, the Grand Prix, and 8-0 combined. So yeah, Perez couldn't outrace Max on any of the occasions so far in the first 6 races. Average sprint race finish is 1.5 for Max, which is the best. 3.5 for Perez is second best, tied with Russell, which is not bad at all. Sprints are being all right for Perez, but when it comes to the races, Max again P2 just behind Russell at 3.7 average race finish, but Perez at 9.2. That's so much lower than, for example, Tsunoda. We'll get to that later, obviously. And combined average sprint race plus race position, 3.1 for Max, which is tied the best with Russell. 7.8 for Perez. Yeah, compared to Tsunoda, who's driving a Racing Bulls car, not good at all. Yeah, that's it for Red Bull. You would expect these kind of head-to-heads based on last year as well, so nothing too surprising, to say the least. Okay, sprint quali for Mercedes is tied, but quali is actually 5-1 for George Russell. Russell had really stepped up this season and the simulation, beating Lewis quite convincingly in the quali head-to-head, which translated to the combined sprint quali plus quali head-to-head 6-2. for Russell. Average sprint quality position, Russell is leading there as well, 4.0 compared to Lewis is 5.0. Average quality position, Russell is actually leading all the drivers at 3.0. That's a very, very consistent number, with Lewis only managing at 7.7. Combined, it's 3.3 for Russell, which is the best again, and Lewis only 7, which is this is beating the McLarens though. Not actually, McLarens are beating it, but it's beating Carlos Sainz, for example, who is another driver who's been struggling season. Sprint race 2-0 for Russell. The race itself 5-1 to Russell. So Russell really stepped up in the races as well this year, with the 7-1 being the head-to-head with sprint races and races combined. This is very, very surprising considering the last season, and in the fashion of Lewis beating Russell in the races most of the time. But here is the opposite. The average sprint race finishing position 3.5 for Russell. Yeah, that's the tied second best, and 6.0 for Hamilton, which is not bad, but it's not good either compared to Russell. Average race finish, same. Russell is actually the best at 3.0, with Hamilton only at 6.0, so 3 positions behind on average in the race finish. In the combined sprint race plus race, it's 3.1 for Russell and 6 for Lewis. Yeah, number 6 for Lewis is kind of there. Yeah, Russell being the better driver in the simulation is very surprising, but obviously there's the potential in Russell. We all know he has, but beating Lewis like this, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I would not say it's not it's. What I'm gonna say is that it can happen, but it's very, very unlikely. Just couldn't get it out of my head. Sorry about that. Yeah. Well, obviously, whenever I set up the basic base numbers for the drivers, I put Lewis as better at the races and Russell a bit better in quali, which absolutely doesn't translate into this, as Hamilton is being beaten in the races quite a bit. Yeah, moving on to the Aston Martin team. 2-0 for Alonso in sprint quali, 5-1 in quali, and 7-1 in quali head-to-head combined. Yeah, this is what we would expect based on last year as well, same as Red Bull. Average sprint quali position 7.5 for Alonso, 12.5 for Stroll. Stroll is having a horrific average qualifying position as well, 11.7 compared to Alonso's 5.5. Average sprint quali plus quali position is also very different from Alonso. It's 11.9. That's just the average quali position of 12 in the Aston Martin is just not good for Stroll. 6 for Alonso is brilliant. Sprint race 2-0, race 6-0, and combined race head-to-head 8-0. So Stroll being demolished in the races as we would expect as well. The average sprint race finish is 5.0 compared to 9.0 in favor of Alonso, with the average race finish is just even worse at 4.8 for Alonso and 12.0 for Stroll. The average is 4.9 for Alonso and 11.3 for Stroll. Just horrific. Stroll is probably the least impressive driver. Maybe not the least impressive driver as a whole, but probably the least impressive driver compared to their teammate. As I mean that they're struggling compared to their teammate the most. Basically, the margin towards their teammate, I think, is the biggest out of any driver pairing. Yeah, I guess we're going to Ferrari, which is I wanted to look at the quali first, which is tied in all fronts except the averages. Basically, the head-to-heads are tied in every single aspect, but the averages are in favor of Leclerc by on average 1 to 1.5 average advantage for Leclerc, but in the races, that's where the points come, and that's where the drivers' championship gap between the Ferrari drivers is basically because of 2-0 for sprint races, 5-1 for race, and 7-1 for combined race head-to-head for Ferrari. And when we look at the average finish, it's not looking good either. 5.0 for Leclerc, 9.5 for Sainz in the sprints, 5.2 for Leclerc in the races, and 7.5 for Sainz. Considering he got a victory, this is just a bad number at this point. Combined is not any better. 5.1 for Leclerc, 8 for Carlos Sainz. Leclerc being much better driver in the races, which we would probably expect Sainz to be closer in the races to Charles than in the quali, but it seems like it's a different story in the simulation. When you look at Alpine, this is a very strange head-to-head. In the sprint qualies and actually sprint races as well, Ocon is beating Gasly. But in quali, it's tied. Combined quali, that means that Ocon is actually ahead. In the average sprint quali, it's the same thing as basically Ocon beating Gasly 2 times, so the average is 3 positions off. But the average quali position is exactly the same. It's tied as well as their quali head-to-head. So if it wasn't versus sprints, they would be exactly the same as in terms of qualifying, basically. Look at the average qualifying combined. There we have the edge for Ocon as he has the better stats for sprints. Look at the races. Yeah, 2-0 for Ocon in the sprint races, but 5-1 for Gasly in the races. Despite Ocon being ahead in the championship, it's actually 5-1 to Gasly in the race head-to-head, which means it's 5-3 for the combined head-to-head in the races. Yeah, Gasly being the better driver in the races seemingly, but behind the championship. Interesting. Average sprint race result position or whatever, 9.5, 12.5, basically the same as average sprint quali, which is weird. I mean, the exact same averages for both in both things. Those are not copied numbers. They're like their finishes in sprint quali and sprint races are exactly the same in terms of averages compared to like both of their stats. That is just a very strange occurrence there. Average race finish. I want to point out this. Ocon is heading into championship, but look at the average race position, 14.2 compared to Gasly's 11.6. This is such a huge margin. Ocon is ahead in the championship, but it's getting pretty convincingly beaten by Gasly in the main races. Average sprint race plus race head-to-head. When we combine them, Gasly still pretty much better at 11.8 compared to 13. So yeah, this is a very, very interesting head-to-head. Then we get to McLaren, which is, in my opinion, the closest one. But obviously, it's probably the closest one overall, thanks to the numbers. Sprint quali head-to-head tied 1-1. Quali head-to-head tied 3-3. Sprint quali plus quali head-to-head tied then 2-4. Average sprint quali position is better for Piastri at 6.5 over to Norris 7.5, but their average quali positions is the same at 6.7, and the average of both qualies is pretty much almost the same as Piastri edges. It's just thanks to the sprint quali position. The sprint races are also tied at 1-1. The races are also tied at 3.3, which means this combined race to head-to-head is also tied at 4-4. Look at the average sprint race finish, also tied at 7.5. Both of them have the same sprint race average finish. The race average finish is pretty much the same as well, as 5.6 for Norris compared to Piastri's 5.8. So Norris just edges Piastri here, but the combined average of sprint races plus races is also then on Norris's side, just barely. This is such a close driver pairing. I would probably say that I wouldn't say they're the most consistent in terms of like putting out results from their car, because I'm pretty sure they could be much higher if not for the no time sets in many countless quali sessions. Yeah, this is just extremely close head to head for the McLaren drivers. Moving on to the Haas, which is continuing on the last season basically. Sprint quali head to head 2-0 for Hulkenberg, 5-1 the quali head to head for Hulkenberg. That means 7.1 combined head to head. As we move on to this average sprint quali position, 15.0 for Hulkenberg and 17.5 for Magnussen. So Hulkenberg on average gets into SQ2. In quali, it's even better for Hulkenberg. So Hulkenberg is 14.7 and Magnussen 3 behind at 17.7. So Hulkenberg on average qualifying 3 positions ahead as per the average sprint quali plus quali, 14.8 compared to 17.6 for Magnussen. The sprint race is tied at 1-1, but the race is 5-0 for Hulkenberg. So Hulkenberg having the edge in the races as well here in the simulation, 6-1 in the combined races. Yeah, the average position doesn't really matter too much. It's just Hulkenberg beating Magnussen pretty convincingly in every aspect at this point. But it's really hard to show because both of them are in a very bad car. But Hulkenberg has scored points, so I guess that's the main thing about this. When we look at the Sauber head-to-head, Bottas beating Zhou in the sprint qualies, but they're tied in qualies, which means Bottas is 5-3 ahead in the combined quali head-to-head. But his average sprint quali position is much better than Zhou's, even though their quali position is pretty much the same. With Bottas being barely better, their average sprint quali plus quali position is therefore in favor of Bottas by just under 1 average position separated them, which would basically mean that Bottas qualifying P17 and Zhou qualifying P18 is the most likely occurrence right now. In the race head-to-head, we have Bottas 2-0 in the sprint races, but losing 2-4 in the races head-to-head against Zhou. So the race head-to-head is tied 4-4. But the average sprint race position is in favor of Bottas, obviously, with the average race position being in favor of Zhou, who is heading the championship thanks to the P11. I think it was in Australia. So the average race position, combined average, is in favor of Zhou this time. So Bottas being better in quali, but Zhou seemingly better in the races. Tsunoda and Ricciardo in the Racing Bulls, tied in sprint quali 1-1, tied in quali 3-3, tied in sprint quali plus quali 4-4. Therefore, we could look at the average qualifying. It's much better for Tsunoda, even though they're tied in the head-to-head. But it's also much better for Ricciardo in the sprint quali. They're tied there as well. But the average is on the regular quali side because there have been just more qualies, and it generally matter more as qualifying P9 for the race is valuable more than qualifying P9 for the sprint. The average quali combined average is in favor of Tsunoda by 1.2 average position. So Tsunoda being better in this aspect, seemingly. Sprint race actually 2-0 for Ricciardo. Average finish is actually better by 2.5 positions as well. But in the races, it's a completely different story. Tsunoda is getting points and more points, just getting them every single time at almost 5-1 in the race head-to-head with 6.7 average finish for Tsunoda. This is insane number. Ricciardo in 10.4, which is not horrible, but it's pretty underwhelming compared to Tsunoda's. Average sprint race and race combined average is therefore in favor of Tsunoda by 2.2 positions. Then I get to the last but not least, Williams. A 1-1 sprint quali head-to-head, but 6-0 quali head-to-head for Albon. Therefore, 7-1 sprint quali combined head-to-head. Quali head-to-head. Yeah, basically the same thing as last year. Sargent just not being able to compete with Albon's raw speed, let's say, like that. Average sprint quali position is actually in favor of Sargent, which is, I think, the only aspect where Sargent is ahead. Average quali position, yeah, pretty much in favor of Albon by quite a bit, as well as the average sprint quali plus quali position. But I don't think it's as bad as it was last year. I think there's some improvement for sure. Sprint race head-to-head 2-0 for Albon and 5-1 for the race head-to-head. The one time Sargent finished ahead, he scored 2 points. So finally, we had a weekend where Sargent outperformed Albon, but still the head-to-heads just look not good. 7-1 for the average sprint race plus race head-to-head. Average sprint race finish are pretty much similar, but the race finish 11.8 for Albon with 14.5 for Sargent. So definitely some room for improvement, as the average sprint race plus race combined are there's a big margin as well of 2.3 positions on average, which is probably much smaller than in 2023, but still, you would like Sargent to be closer to Albon for him to maintain, like, for him to deserve the seat on Williams at this rate. If this would be actually the real life occurrence, I'm pretty sure Sargent would probably get dropped after the second season at the team. Yeah, this is it for the head-to-head. So this is probably it for the recap as well. I hope this was interesting for you and for the viewers of my simulation. I'll be doing this every 6 races, and yeah, looking forward to the next video, which will be tomorrow for the, what is it, but for you it's Friday. For me, I'm pre-recording this on different day. For you should be Friday. The Imola Grand Prix should be out. So as my brain, I think my brain works properly in here, so it should be fine. Okay. Yeah. This is it for the head-to-heads. So this is it for the recap. So if you enjoyed this video and enjoyed my simulations and my F1 content, please consider subscribing, liking the video, commenting. I'll appreciate anything, any interactions with me. So yeah, if you enjoyed this, consider supporting me in this. So yeah, until next time, until next video, which will be tomorrow for you. So yeah, bye.